All right, good evening, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Drunk Agile. As always, I'm here with my friend and colleague,
Prateek Singh.
and my name is Daniel Vacanti. And of course, we can't forget, last week I almost forgot the star of the show, but here we have the star of the show, Nisha, looking as gorgeous as ever. Please get me out of here. Somebody, please.
Somebody.
Please.
Why? Why me?
Yeah. Start with the usuals. What are you drinking tonight?
I'm trying to wrap up this bottle of Blanton's so that I can open my next one. So that's that. I'm going with the Blanton's today.
Hopefully we do. Hopefully do that next one in person. Oops.
Yep.
Got away from me. I went with. I know, and I know this is a repeat, but the Glendronach I bottled myself. 60%. Looks like 60% exactly. Alcohol sherry cask.
That is a good one. I remember that one.
It's a good one. It's one of my faves. So anyway, cheers to everybody. Hopefully you have your favorite drink with you, and let's get to this. All right, tonight we're going to be talking about probably the most overused, most overhyped, most whatever you want to say, metric of them all. And it's not really even a metric. I guess it's kind of a metric, but it's kind of a derived. It's more of a calculation than a metric, really, than a measurement. It's more of a calculation than a measurement for sure. And that is flow efficiency. We're going to be talking about flow efficiency tonight. So I don't know, Prateek, do you want to set us up and maybe get us all on the same page in terms of just what is flow efficiency? So we're all talking about the same thing, and then let's tear it down based on that definition.
So just to set the stage, the explanation for the metric is right in the name. It's essentially something that figures out how efficient your flow is, the flow of work across your board.
That's profound.
How efficient is that?
It's so profound.
I know. Hey.
Flow efficiency is a measure of the efficiency of your flow.
I am the Yogi Berra of Agile. So essentially, what you do is you figure out how long it takes for something. For let's take a single item. How long does it take for that item from the point that it enters the process to the point it exits the process, the cycle time? Let's find out how long that was. And then let's find out how much of that cycle time was active versus how much of that cycle time was inactive, where inactive means people weren't exactly working on this. This thing was just sitting there waiting for someone to pick it up or blocked by something, whatever the case might be. It wasn't active. So you have these three things. You have your inactive time, your active time. Both of those should equal your total cycle time. And in order to figure out flow efficiency, you go, what is the ratio between the active time and your total cycle time? What percentage of your total cycle time was this item actually actively being worked on? That gives you the metric of flow efficiency. You're muted.
Crap, I'm muted. You hit on a couple of very, very, very important points there that I muted myself, by the way, because I didn't want to be laughing at you while you were speaking. But you did hit a couple of points that bear stressing, because this is going to be so important when we get to the next part of the conversation. You know, as an item is moving through your process, it's essentially in one of two states. It's either actively being worked on or not actively being worked on. And that's crucial when we talk about, okay, how do we track whether it's actively being worked on or not actively worked on? And so that not actively being worked on, as you said, could be it's queuing, waiting to be pulled. No one's working on it. It's just sitting there queuing, waiting to be pulled. Or, you know, it's in some type of active column, but it's blocked because of some external dependency or whatever. So that's of crucial importance that people understand that in flow, any particular item is really, generically speaking, just in one of two states, either actively being worked on and not actively being worked on, okay? All right, so now let's say I do the calculation, like you said, it's the ratio of my total active time. So I take my total cycle time, I subtract out all that inactive stuff, that gives me my total active time, and then I divide that by the total cycle time. That ratio is flow efficiency. So what does that tell me? Okay, so I get a percentage of, 24.7%. What does that mean?
So theoretically, what that's telling us, at least on the face of it, if we're able to calculate all the stuff, is that of the entire amount of time that someone was waiting, assuming that at the end of your cycle time, you're handing this off to someone who's waiting for this item, of the entire time that someone was waiting for this item, we were working on this item only 24.7, whatever you said, percent of the time. The rest of the time, it was just sitting there and just sitting there being inactive while people were still waiting for this item.
Yeah. So if we make the math really easy, let's say, and I think I said 24.7. We'll have to go to the tape and find out if that's what. But let's say I said 24.7. Let's say an item had 100-day cycle time. Nope. A
No,
1,000 days.
1,000 days.
1,000. I've only had 2 sips, I swear. 1,000. No, 1,000,000. Let's say no, right? Okay, so let's say an item had 1,000 days of cycle time, which, by the way, if you've seen some of our data, is not completely out of the realm of possibility, right?
Definitely not out of the.
Let's say that an item had 1,000 days of cycle time, a 24.7% flow efficiency, means that it only spent 247 days actively being worked on, and quick, do the math for me.
75.
753, is that right?
Yes.
753 days not being worked on. It's good that you've come to us for all of your math needs. Right? So 247 days actively being worked on versus 753 days not being worked on. So in terms of, why is it important to know that? I mean, why do people advocate for flow efficiency as a calculation? Why is it important for me to know 247 days active, 753 days not active? Why is that so important?
Yeah, because in a direct and an indirect way, I guess it tells you how much waste might be in your system, how much cycle time you're spending not actually doing work. How it could be a measurement of essentially that. How much time are you really wasting instead of maybe being productive? Yeah,
absolutely. If I can add on to that, I mean, there's really 2 things that I like to say about why people advocate for it. The first being is it's supposed to give us a good indication, and it does. I don't want to say it doesn't. Give us a good indication of where to spend our effort in terms of process improvement. Mm-hmm. If something spends 247 days actively being worked on and 700 something not actively being worked on, then your biggest bang for the buck in terms of process improvement is to go after that wait time. It's not going to go after, it's not going to improve the 200 days.
Typing faster is not going to help you.
Yeah, exactly. At that point, that's number one. And then number 2, kind of from a learning perspective, getting people to understand that in really low flow efficiency environments are really hard to estimate. You know, there are all these estimation techniques out there, and the problem is most estimation techniques focus on kind of that happy path of how much time are we actively spending working on something, when the vast majority of time you're spending time not working on something, and that estimation only captures that really small percentage of that total amount of time. So those are the 2 real reasons why a lot of people will say flow efficiency is so important to know. Number 1, it gives us a guide as to where we should look for in terms of process improvement. And number 2, it's a useful teaching technique because it helps people to understand that, hey, all that estimation stuff that you may be doing is not really probably doing you much good because you're ignoring all of this waste, like you said, Prateek. Right?
But
okay. And shit, there's another. Okay, go.
No, not and what I won't say. But Dan, if it is so good, if it can tell us all these things, then why do you rail against it? Why are you not a fan of flow efficiency?
I think it comes down to pretty much everything that we talk about. It comes down to practicality, right? When I get upset about a method, a calculation, or whatever being advocated, my litmus test is really how practical is it? How pragmatic is it? How realistic is it for us to calculate this thing? So let's tear this down and let's talk about, all right, to get that flow efficiency, what do we really need to know? So for example, Prateek, let's say that I've got a process that is to do, doing, and done. Mm-hmm. and I only count, in terms of my cycle time, I only count the time that's in doing. What's my flow efficiency going to be in that
Yeah,
case?
in that process, unless you're able to somehow capture block time, you literally have no idea how to calculate it. Because
Right.
if doing is all active, then it's always 100.
And so that is my first big problem with flow efficiency is that most teams have no clue where the wait states are in their process. And even if they do have a clue where their wait states are in their process, they probably haven't modeled them properly. And even if they've modeled them properly, and by the way, when I say modeled them properly, I'm talking about things like maybe splitting columns into
Mhm.
active and finished, or potentially having a ready column, or whatever. That you've properly, like on a Kanban board, you've explicitly put in places where items are waiting. So number one, most teams don't do that. Number two, even if they do, even if they have modeled those wait states properly, they're not updating their items in near enough real time to accurately capture that stuff. So, how many times do we work with teams that there is an item that is waiting? It's actually done, but they haven't actually moved it to the done state, right?
Mhm.
They keep it in the active state forever until they remember 3 days later, oh, well, let's move it over to done, by which time, your metrics, your calculation is going to be totally screwed up. If you don't move it for 3 days and it's got an 8-day cycle time, I mean, that really kind of blows your calculation out of the water.
Yeah, or if it was blocked due to an external dependency and we didn't, teams just take 2 to 3
Uh,
days to get there. Yeah.
I was going to get to blocked in a second, but of course,
Uh,
you have to jump
we
ahead.
were talking about updating the things.
Yeah. So, but that's true. You're right. You're right. You're right. We're going to get to blocked. We're going to get to blocked. But so that's
But
number one. Go ahead. Were you going to say
I
something?
was also going to say, you so far you've talked about teams on the end of the spectrum where, which I don't know. I don't know how broad that end of the spectrum is, that are not very good at maintaining their items and updating their items. When you started the example, you were talking about to do, doing, done. That for me is the other end of the spectrum, which very few teams would get to and say, hey, we're going to simplify everything and just go with to do, doing, done. Whether you are in a very mature state where you've gotten to that, or you're still in that beginning state where people aren't updating their items regularly, in both those cases, I think so far you've made the case that flow efficiency calculations will be inaccurate.
Yeah. And by the way, I want to be clear. There's nothing wrong with the to do, doing, and done workflow. By the way, I mean,
Mhm.
if that's how you want to model your process, and that's perfectly fine. It's just it's going to make it very, very challenging for you to come up with to your point, to come up with a very good flow efficiency calculation. So so that's wait time. Teams don't model wait states. Or teams don't know what their wait states are. Even if they know where the wait states are, they don't model them. Even if they model them, they're not updating their board in near enough real time for it to make a difference. Okay, so that's number one. So now let's talk about blocked, right? Which you already kind of jumped ahead. And blocked is very, very similar. What are some of the problems that you see when we talk about blocked items with team? I mean, just fundamental problems that you see when talking
Yeah.
about blocked items with teams.
The most fundamental problem I see is teams have not defined what blocked even means.
Yes.
It's just that's
Yes.
the just like flow efficiency is how efficient your flow is.
Yeah.
Blocked is your item blocked or not, and that is a specific definition of we have. I am not able to move on this item for X amount of time because I'm waiting for something, and for most teams that's not defined.
Yep. And I mean, I couldn't agree. That's why I teed it up for you. I couldn't agree more. That's the thing. I mean, because we talk about this ad nauseum in our trainings, but it's one thing to talk about why it's so important to visualize blockers and track blockers and everything, but it's quite some other thing to actually put that into practice and do it. And there's almost always confusion around a team in terms of, well, what does it mean when something's blocked, and how do I block it, and what do I do once it's blocked, and how do I unblock it, right? Even the fundamentals. Again, we're talking about the pragmatic side, the mechanics of blocking it. Most teams don't really have a good consistent way of tracking that stuff. So some items are blocked when they're blocked, and some items aren't blocked when they're blocked. And again, like you said, if we're not updating those blockers in near real time, that's going to throw our flow efficiency calculation, off as well. Sorry, did you have something you wanted to say about that?
No, that was it. I mean, it's at any given point of time, whichever random team you want to look at, just go to a random team, pull up their board, and count the number of things that are blocked or in queuing states. And my guess is that the actual number of things blocked or in queuing states is going to be different from that.
Yep.
For a vast majority of teams, it will be different from whatever you count up on their board.
Yep. Okay, so now, but we haven't even gotten to the worst part. Believe it or not, we haven't even gotten to the worst part yet. This is the pièce de la résistance. I can't speak French when I'm drunk. So let's say we're on a team where we have modeled all our weight states properly, and we are updating all of our items in real time with those weight states. And we have definitions of what blockers are, and we're doing an excellent job of turning blockers on and blockers off. And we've got all of that nailed, right? So we have pristine, beautiful data, right? So now I get something that pops out the other end. And like I said, it's, 49.7% flow efficiency. So what, right? Or even worse, one item comes out that's 49.7% flow efficiency, and the next one pops out that's 43.2% flow efficiency. What does that even mean, right? I mean, can we legitimately say one was more efficient than the other? I don't know, maybe. What does that mean in terms of process improvement? Nothing. I mean, the best, in my humble opinion, the best that you can really say around flow efficiency in general, in terms of identifying areas for improvement, is that 50% mark, right? Anything that has a flow efficiency below 50%, that means that the majority of your time is that wait time, that inactive time. And so that's where you should go after. Anything over 50% tells you the majority of time is that active time. And that's what you should go after. But here's where, and we were talking about our good friend and colleague, Frank Vega, before the call. And this is where I need to give a shout out to Frank. Frank's point, and I hope I'm not putting words in his mouth, and I hope I'm not misstating, but Frank Vega's point is, all the effort that it took you to come up with that perfect, excellent flow efficiency number, in most contexts, you can just guess that the majority of your time is inactive time and go after inactive time. You don't need the precision of an exact number to know that, you know what, we should be attacking inactive time, right? You just don't need the calculation at all in most contexts. Sorry, were you gonna say something?
I think I had like 5 things queued up as you.
Oh,
you
sorry.
But that's good. It's good. No, you were on a roll there. But to that exact point though, it's and there is absolutely no way we would be releasing these in order. So if we did for any reason, in our very first video that we did on Drunk Agile, we talked about story points and how that sort of precision it almost defeats the purpose of what you're trying to do. And this is almost the same thing. This is almost that exact precision almost defeats the purpose of what you're trying to do. It's something you kind of already know. You could look at a board and see, hey, there are always 5 things waiting while there are only 3 things active. It's kind of obvious when you just look at a board, and it'll tell you that. Beyond that, even, and you gave an example where one was 49.7, another was 43. If you look at real data for a lot of teams, and given that they're probably tracking this pretty off, the range is going to be much larger than that. Mm-hmm. The range is going to be, hey, this expedite came in, it was 100. These other things that have been, kind of, we picked it up because the developer really wanted to work on this, but then wasn't that important, all that will be 5-10%. At that point, what you resort to is doing things like taking the average of it, and let's find out what's our overall flow efficiency. If again, this is, so we should have probably done this from the beginning and said every time we mention the flaw of averages, take a drink.
Yeah. Okay, yeah.
You're firmly in flaw of averages territory
Take a
now.
drink. Mhm.
Yeah. And then, so even if you get all that precision, get all that right, where you'll end up falling in that flaw of averages territory. Meanwhile, you could have just looked at the board at any point of time and gone, hey, it looks like there are always 4 things waiting.
Right.
Maybe we should fix this.
Exactly right. Or like Frank says, even if you're not looking at a board, guess. Guess that's what the problem is. And the vast majority of times you will be right, just making that guess. Yeah, and I totally forgotten about the flaw of. I'm glad you brought that up. Totally forgotten about the flaw of averages, because now we get into some philosophical, actually academic debate. Do we care about the flow efficiency of an individual item? Do we care about the flow efficiency of their overall process? Do we care about the flow efficiency of specific work item types? For the most part, doesn't matter. Do you have anything more negative to say about flow efficiency? Because I feel like we should end on a positive. There's maybe one positive thing that we can mention about flow efficiency, but
it's the other slight confusion, or I guess miscalculation, that can creep in is the fact that most of the time, cycle time is defined as number of days. Now, if something keeps getting blocked for half a day here, for half a day there,
yeah.
does that day, does that contribute towards an active day, or does it contribute? I mean, there are multiple. How granular do you get? And the more granular you get, the more complicated the calculation gets. And yeah, it's another case of chasing precision and then losing the overall message of the metric itself.
Yeah, so, I mean, same thing could be said for wait time, right? I mean, if something is in a done column for half a day,
What does that mean?
Yeah, I mean, how much of that do we count against? Yeah, should we start tracking cycle time in hours then? Minutes,
Then,
seconds, milliseconds?
in that case, between the hours of 5 and 9,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and don't forget about weekends, Prateek. We can't count weekends. Have we done one on weekends? I don't know if we've.
I'm sure we have.
I'm sure we have. I'm sure we've covered that. I'm sure. So, all right. So that's. I mean, hopefully, and of course, this is just our opinion. But really, I mean, if you're watching this video, you should be listening to what we say. But those are all the arguments against flow efficiency that the people who are proponents of flow efficiency either don't understand or ignore, but they certainly won't tell you. They certainly won't tell you all of these negatives, around the mechanics of actually even, what it takes to get a good flow efficiency number. And then even when you've spent all that effort to get a good flow efficiency number, it doesn't really tell you anything, right? So they're not going to mention that. But let's mention. I think we should mention maybe one positive. We'll finish on a positive note for flow efficiency. Let's say we are one of these teams where we do have pristine data and we're capturing everything wonderfully, and our flow efficiency is constantly in the the above 50%, and probably well above 50%, 60, 70, even 80. Although I don't, in the real world, I don't know that 80 is really legitimately possible. Maybe it is in some contexts. So what does that mean then? And that. Where that might be good is if you take that to its logical conclusion, it might lead you to a process improvement that you might not have thought of already. Because remember, as Prateek started out, and this is the reason I had him define it. Remember, Prateek started out by saying flow efficiency is defined between two specific points. You've defined when an item starts and when an item finishes. Once you've got a flow efficiency that's really, really good, and assuming you can trust that number, what that's going to ultimately suggest then is that the definition, the boundaries of your system are too narrow. That you're going to need to start expanding those boundaries, either upstream to talk about what happens, before items come into our process, or downstream to talk about what happens when items leave our process. One of Prateek's favorite things, I think you've said this before, is he doesn't believe that done stops with production. He believes that there should be at least at least one column or one state after production, which is get feedback from the customer, something like that. And I mean, how much time does it really take us to get feedback from the customer? What would that do to our flow efficiency? If we talked about, hey, when a product owner really started thinking about a feature, right, and that thing went into progress, what would our flow efficiency be then before it finally went into production? So, once you start expanding the scope of your flow system, the boundaries of your flow system, you'll see your flow efficiency will plummet, and then you'll take all those improvement steps that we've talked about before all over again. That's true. That's how we get to true end-to-end business agility. That seems to be so popular right now. So, and did you have something to say about that?
No, that's exactly it. I mean, if you can trust the number, it helps you find out
Yep.
Whether to improve between the lines or whether to expand the lines.
Yep. But just like with theory of constraints, I don't know if we've done a talk on theory of constraints or not. But just like with theory of constraints, if you think you have a really good flow efficiency number and you're ready to expand the boundaries of your system, and in reality, you've got a really, really bad flow efficiency number, expanding those boundaries of your process is probably the absolute worst thing that you can do, which again is where you get into trouble with flow efficiency. So I think we've probably beaten that one enough. I mean, as always, I like to give you the last word. Do you have anything to say to sum us up or to bring us home?
Yeah, I just want to say I understand why people are a fan of flow efficiency. I understand because theoretically it's sound. Theoretically, it makes sense. It's just one of those things that when you go in to try to do the practical application of it, the effort to get it implemented is probably not worth the reward, because you would have gotten to that reward, to that result, without even having to do all that stuff. Again, I get why people like flow efficiency, but it's just one of those things that there is a shortcut to the same answer that you were going to get to.
Yep. So flow efficiency bad, Dan and Prateek good. That's, and Nisha even better. Nisha the best. So
she opened her eyes. I don't know if you saw that. She opened her eyes. She was like, "What are you talking about me?"
I didn't even get through my whole drink. Usually I've had like 2 by now. Did you finish yours?
We were talking too much this time.
I definitely was talking too much. All right. So that's enough for flow efficiency. For my friend and colleague, Prateek Singh, and for the star of the show, Nisha, of course, my name is Daniel Vacanti. Thank you very much for joining us for this edition of Drunk Agile, and we will see you in the next episode. Good night, everybody. Be safe, be well.